So I first met Kay in 1977, and as I said in the Penny story, Reza Leia, who was my spiritual teacher, wanted us to meet. And Kay was not the easiest to track down, but I was told I would find her at a sit-in at Wary Housing in the Presidio. It was 1997, and she was participating in an act of civil disobedience with other folks from Religious Witness for Homelessness, as they wanted to save the houses from being torn down and instead have the government create housing for homeless and low-income individuals. After Kay and all the folks unlinked their arms and got their citations, we finally talked and we decided to meet up for coffee. We did meet for coffee, and after a couple of hours, we decided we had some work to do in this world, in this congregation, in this city, and in our own selves. And we began walking the streets together in 1998 and founded the Faithful Fools. Now fast forward to 2018. We were anticipating and preparing for our 20th year celebration as Faithful Fools when Kay passed away. Though it had been a few years since she was able to live with us, we always knew she was with us. She was that spirit at the doorway leading out, and her life and ministry did call us to the crossroads. The boundary-crossing trickster that she was, she stood at the gates of this congregation and of the city, of the seminary and the Fool's Court, making sure there was commerce. As Faithful Fools, we had declared the 20th year to be a year of reflection, a year to remember our way forward. When Kay died, I also knew that this would be the year that I would walk the Camino de Santiago, the way of St. James. It was something I had mused about for 17 years after hearing Laura Friedman, who was a ministerial intern with us in 2001, speak of her experience. As I listened to Laura, I felt a little ping in my mind. And over the next 17 years, that ping kept pinging. As I anticipated finally doing the walk, I also knew I wanted to do it alone. I was curious, mostly about what I would find out about me, what was occupying the crevices of my mind and heart after 20-plus years. So after Kay's memorial, after a magnificent celebration, thank you, Mark, and the choir, after summer passed, I took off. I made my way to the border of France and Spain, where the Camino Frances begins. I checked in at the pilgrim's office, got the first stamp in my pilgrim's passport. I was given some sheets of paper that had suggestions of how far to walk each day and the various elevations of the terrain. A kind fellow at the pilgrim's office helped me find a hostel for the night, and I settled in, along with a number of other folks from many parts of the world who were also beginning the walk. I got up the next day, put on my boots, readied my backpack, and began walking. Now, the first day was over the Pyrenees. 12-plus miles, a steady and mostly steep walk up 5,000 feet. Nothing would have prepared me, no matter how much I would have exercised. It was absolutely gorgeous, The skies were blue, the mountain views were stunning. I quietly conversed with the cows and the sheep that grazed along the way, and it was extremely difficult, more difficult than I had ever imagined. It was dark when I finally made it to Roncesvalles, the first day's destination. It had taken me 11 plus hours, and I was exhausted. I could hardly take another step, and my Achilles tendons were crying out. Why did I want to do this? I sat that night and stared at the paper I was given at the pilgrim's office with the suggested breakup of the days and wondered, can I really do it? I looked at the steepness of the elevation I had just walked, and there were many more steep declines and inclines ahead of me. I looked at where I needed to walk the next day and then fell asleep. I awoke early again, readied my pack, and began walking. I walked very slowly, relying a lot on my walking sticks, and person after person would pass me up because I was going so slow. But I was content, and I was alone. I was in no hurry and saw a lot more than I would have if I would have walked quickly. I eventually made it to the second destination before nightfall. I found a place to stay, had supper with fellow pilgrims, and laid down. I chatted a bit with my bunkmate Marcos, who was from Italy and already had severe blisters on his feet. Soon I fell asleep, and I was aware I didn't feel well. I got up the next day, readied my pack, walked out into the street, and I still didn't feel very well. Did I have the energy to walk? I was battling with expectations I had of myself. Me, myself, and I were going back and forth when a bus approached, and with little hesitation, I got on it and rode to Pamplona. I rented a single room and went to bed. Up to that moment, I had spent many hours and years imagining this walk. I had a lot of ideas and ideals of what it would be like and how I wanted to do it. It reminded me of a day early in Kay's and my working. We had talked a lot about wanting to live in the Tenderloin. We had found a building right in the heart of the neighborhood where we could live and work. It had a living space and program space. We were so excited, and we were readying ourselves to move in, and then whoosh. I was flooded with, oh my God, do I really want to do this again? I loved the quiet of my little studio in the Berkeley Hills. I went home every night to the mostly quiet company of myself alone. I had just come from Nicaragua, where I lived for 7 years in the barrio, where our house was also the primary community space, and our bedrooms had no ceilings. People were always at the door or in the house. The realities of poverty and trauma and angering injustice were ever present, and I could count on one hand how many times I heard silence in those 7 years, day or night. This particular moment, Kay and I were sitting at All Stars Donuts, our downtown office in the Tenderloin, and I was going on and on, lamenting the loss of my secure little room and questioning whether I really wanted to do this public living thing all over again. And finally, when Kay had enough, she looked me in the eye and she said, "Do ya or don't ya?" That's Minnesota talk. Yes, I said. I simply said yes. It was settled. We were moving into the Tenderloin, into the Fool's Court. No more wavering. Now, sitting in the cafe in Pamplona, it was a similar moment. This time I was asking myself, amidst all the doubts and excuses, Are you going to walk or not? Well, I had some practice with this question, and with the answer too, for that matter, and I said yes. I got up the next day and started walking and felt happy with my feet on the path and once again being in the company of other pilgrims. Because the voices in my head are always occupied with something, now came the inquiry of the self. What is it you're walking toward? I knew that a few hundred miles across the country was the Cathedral of St. James, but I didn't think that was it. Walking 500 miles to a tourist-laden cathedral was definitely not what pinged me 17 years earlier. What was the ping? Besides the heavenly thought of walking alone in a land far, far away. I started out by myself, and I met companions along the way. In the second week, I met 3 women, 2 from Scotland and 1 from Colorado, and we eventually became a pod of sorts. By the end of the Camino, we called ourselves the Cuatro Peregrinas Locas, the 4 crazy pilgrims. We walked together, each one of us at our own pace, and we became witnesses to one another. They were with me as I approached the highest point of the Camino and left by the foot of an iron cross, a volcanic rock that had belonged to Kay. When we faithful fools go to Nicaragua, we do our closing reflection at the volcano Masaya. Kay loved that volcano. She felt a relationship with this big force of nature that had burning embers deep down in the belly. When I laid the rock down, I sobbed. It had been months earlier that she had died, but I had yet not had time to really be with her death. I stood there for a while. I thanked her for this crazy life we shared. I thanked her for being my teacher and friend, and then turned around and walked down the mountain. And to my surprise, I felt lighter and excited and free to keep on going, not only with the pilgrimage, but with life. I heard people saying along the way, the Camino is life, and I know I had been thinking that too. To get up every day and start walking requires having an intention and a commitment. And it's easier to do this if there is a mass of others doing it too, just like life. It's important to be walking a yes. Are we in this place today because it has something to do with our collective yes? Having a direction, a commitment, a longing helps us keep moving through the tough spots and lower spirited days. I know I started out thinking it would be grand to walk alone for 40 days, but it didn't take long to be reminded that we are in this life together. And it is a real gift to find our companions and friends to walk with. We may think this life and our efforts are primarily about us and our well-being, but they aren't. The bare fact is that our well-being is bound up with everybody else's in this city, in this congregation, on this planet. As we engage in the work of strategic planning, balancing budgets, reading books and writing poetry, teaching children, working on our computers, it is vital to ask ourselves and one another, what are we walking toward? What compels us to keep on walking? As a congregation, as a city, as neighbors, as a family, What are we walking toward? What are we saying yes to? Are we saying yes to being active citizens of this world and walking together toward a more just and compassionate way of being in the world? A more just and compassionate city? We've been walking a long time, and instead of getting closer, it seems we're getting further away. Do you think we might have missed a yellow arrow that told us which way the path was? Did we take a few wrong turns? There's a lot of territory to cover and work to be done in most every direction we look and walk. Housing, healthcare, education, the prison systems, building repairs after floods. Still, let's not lose hope. It's never too late to get our feet on the right path and start moving in the direction that gets us where we want to go. And there are tricksters in our midst who can lead us to the crossroads. And if we find ourselves backpedaling, tempted to hide away in our little secure spaces, be grateful for the fool who will look in your eye and simply ask, do you or don't you? And then today, as we were leaving the house, Sam reminded me of the little thing that we say to get ourselves going, or when we get a little low, and it comes from the movie The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, where he says, "It'll be all right in the end, and if it ain't all right, it ain't the end." Thank you.